All right. So we're trying to think like how the NFL draft relates to college football, and I think we can learn a lot about the NFL draft, but also a lot about college football. Like on this show, we were like, hey, Riley Leonard, like not really an NFL guy, and now it's like more trended towards he's not really like he probably gets picked as we were saying before the show. But let's stick on quarterbacks here because the scoring was way down this year in the sport of college football, and there's a lot of potential reasons why. But Mike, you and I were chatting down there in Lauderdale. And when I asked you today, do you want to be on the show? You're like, yeah, let's talk some quarterbacks to lead it off the bat. Cam Ward's the one. After that, is Shadour the for sure number 2? Can Shadour actually lead Cam Ward still? Or does he have potential to slide like 3 or 4? What are we seeing with him?
I could see a slide, man. One, because it seems like the top 10 is going to maybe shake out to where everyone gets their guy. I think the Giants might be the only one left holding, waiting for the quarterback. So I think the need may not be there for everyone. And then also it's just like, he's not for everyone. You hear him talk in interviews, you see his demeanor, and you hear the whispers from the combine saying that like he's told teams that like he didn't want to necessarily go to them or didn't try to impress them in those interviews. So yeah, I do think there's not a big gap between him and Jackson Dart in a lot of teams' minds and just a lot of people's minds. I know a lot of people have Jackson Dart as QB2 and not Shadour Sanders, but I do think there is a gap between Cam and Shadour. It's just like physically there's a big gap. Shadour is a lot skinnier. Shadour has a lot weaker arm. Shadour is probably not as athletic. So all those things, I do think Cam's pretty much the clear-cut number 1. That's not to say he's like Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels level prospect that we saw last year, but there's just the tier 2 in this class is they're day 2 guys, in my opinion. And that's fine. It's just sometimes day 2 guys get made day 1 guys because of need. I just don't know if the need's actually going to end up being there.
Well, going off what you just said, put Cam Ward in last year's QB class. Where do you have him ranked with those guys?
He would have been my QB 5 in last year's class. So I had my top 4 was Caleb, Drake, Jaden, and Bo Nix. And then I would have had him behind that. And then I would have had Penix and then McCarthy. So that's where I would have put him. Which again, last year was a unique class. We saw how well those top 4 guys that I mentioned just did. So that's not like any knock on him whatsoever. I still think he's a very good prospect, but still not the level of how I felt about the top guys last year.
So you were a Bo Nix guy.
I love Bo Nix. I think I was driving the Bo Nix train. Not a lot of people were. I was all over it though.
So, yeah, it's a very lonely boxcar, I think. I mean, we had Danny on this show saying that he would grow a beard and not shave if Bo Nix was taken in the top, was it just the first round or top 10 that he said it? I think it was first round.
Yeah, I think it was first round.
Yeah, so Bo goes in the first round, and of course, Danny, being the man of the word that he is, he completely does not live up to the bet. He shaved immediately as soon as his wife gives him any sort of pushback. And he's
like, my anniversary.
I was like, I didn't remember him with the beard, so he must have.
He had it for a good day and a half, and I think the biggest problem for Danny was it took him so long to grow the beard that he was kind of ashamed of it, and then he just immediately uses his wife as an excuse to get rid of it. So yeah, who is, like you mentioned, Jackson Dart. So you were high on Bo Nix last year. A lot of people were caught off guard by Bo Nix being a first-round pick, at least people who follow college closely. I know Michael Penix was the big shock pick going in the top 10, but who is the one quarterback in this class who you look at and say, this is a guy that might go a lot earlier than most people are expecting?
I think it's Tyler Shuck, the Louisville quarterback, because, what NFL teams, what makes a guy go higher? It's talent. It's like arm talent. It's physical capability. It's not necessarily what you've done on a football field already. It's like projecting out what a guy could do. And with him, looks the part, man. I mean, he's big. He's got a good arm. He ran a 4.63 at the combine. He can move. And yeah, he's got this awful injury history, but that's like the reason why he's this oddity as a 26-year-old quarterback coming into the NFL, is because every single year that like he looked like he could have put it together, he got hurt. And so one year that he actually has a full healthy season, like his tape was great this last year in a lot of ways that you want a quarterback to be great. I think he didn't take a lot of sacks behind a really porous offensive line the way Shadour did. He was great under pressure in terms of finding his outlets versus blitzes and things of that nature. And then he did not have receivers that these other, top guys have. There's not a lot of Louisville receivers we're talking about in this draft class going top few rounds, and still made a lot of plays down the football field. So I think when we look at Shuck, he'll have some fans. Now, it's not to say he's going first round, but I'd be surprised if he lasts. I'd be very surprised if he lasts into day 3. I think he could very well go like second round in this draft class. I think that's where we'll see maybe a few guys come off the board, just because these guys have played a ton of football, and Shuck specifically. Like that's the thing that if you look at last year with Jane Daniels, Bo Nix, that I think matters when projecting to the NFL nowadays.
Does his age matter to teams, or like, hey, but I'll get a guy who's going to be 27 in his final year of his rookie deal?
It matters a little. Obviously, you'd rather they be 22 with his experience of 4 years as a starter. But there's been Joe Burrow was 24 as a rookie. Kenny Pickett was 24. It doesn't matter as much for like draft stock, and it's just more. Have you shown mastery at college level, in my opinion, nowadays? It's like, have you been able to master that game? Because if you have, and if it's, if you're Bo Nix's age or Michael Penix's age and it's year 5, year 6 for you, well, I'd rather have that than the guy who's not mastered, as we just saw with like Caleb Williams. It can be, your head can be spinning and you can maybe never figure it out. But the guys who have played a ton of football, those are the guys that at least have a floor to them. And so I think that's what NFL teams are saying. It's like, yeah, maybe he's never going to be Patrick Mahomes coming in the NFL at this age, but you just need a guy who's a competent starter on a rookie deal, and you can build a ton around him at that point.
Yeah, but how often do you get a chance to draft a veteran leader at the quarterback
Right.
spot? Like Tyler Shuck walks into your locker room and he's immediately the oldest man in the room already. He's ready to command that huddle. So you mentioned Shuck as a big arm guy. I'm high on Kyle McCord for a lot of the same reasons I think you are with Shuck, although I don't think McCord is anything the athlete as far as his mobility as Tyler Shuck is. What are your thoughts on McCord? Because, I mean, I think he comes from a similar situation where when you look at the Syracuse offense, they had a good run game and they had a Rondé Gadsden, but it's not as if he had a lot of top-tier talent at receiver he was working with, but I thought he had a very good season with the Orange.
I loved his tape this last year. So much NFL translatable stuff. The way he's able to play within timing of the offense was probably about as good as it gets in this draft class. And that's something that once you get to the NFL, you better be doing. You better be hitting downfield routes on the breaks, or else the windows close a lot faster. So he's very good at that. I do think he's limited athletically. That's going to be basically his biggest knock, is that everyone at the NFL today, everyone's chasing the guy who can create, who can do a little outside of structure. And I think he's good enough in structure that he can still get by without it. And he's got a good arm, but he also is kind of very up and down in terms of the turnovers. Like, he's a guy that had a lot more turnover worthy plays than other people in this draft class. And then there's also going to be the questions of, why was Ohio State too big for him? He's not the first guy to need to transfer programs. Obviously, Bo Nix going from Auburn to Oregon, like, that changed his future drastically. And so, like, maybe he has matured and maybe he can handle a bigger stage right now, but he's even said, like, he thought there was too much pressure on him at Ohio State. Well, lo and behold, there's got to be a lot of pressure at you at the NFL level too. So I think that's also one of the bigger knocks on him, but he was awesome this past year. I'm not going to poke too many holes in his tape. And I think after, I do think the top 3 are going to be some combination of Ward, Dart, Shadour. After that, it wouldn't surprise me if he's the 4th quarterback off the board.
Mike, let me ask you about this. So Ohio State dogged the hell out of this kid on the way out, right? Like, they let it be known, like, they did not want to keep him. So he goes to Syracuse, and in the ACC, basically every other year you have a really hard schedule or a really easy schedule. And last year, in year 1 under Fran Brown, they get McCord, and they get the easiest draw in the conference, like, by a lot. The two good teams they played in the league were teams that had pretty abhorrent defenses, right? Like, Georgia Tech's defense was not great. Miami's defense was putrid. Everybody else they played kind of flat out sucked, to be honest. How do you square, okay, Ohio State was done with this dude at a much higher level of competition, with he goes to a lower level of competition at Syracuse, who then draws like the easiest draw in that lower level league? Like, how, as an evaluator, like, does that matter?
It's getting harder in my sort of shoes with the way kind of conference realignment's gone. Obviously, if you're in the Big Ten, SEC, you're golden. But if you're in the Big 12 or the ACC, you may not be playing NFL players, right? You may not be actually going up against the schedule. And
Just want to point out, Mike said that, not Bud. Big 12 fans, to leave Bud alone.
Yep. I love the Big 12 for entertainment value.
But it's just like, it's a fact of life, is that, when you see the Pittsburgh game where he had 5 picks, it's like, that should be, a big swirling alarm bell that's like, damn, like one of the better defenses, like one time on that schedule, if you have that sort of game, well, what would it have looked like if you played Georgia and Alabama? What would it have looked like if you were in the SEC week in and week out? So yeah, it's going to be more difficult for guys at that level to just properly evaluate, because you can never really quantify competition level. It's difficult to, but that's why NFL evaluators lean on and will give deference to the guys who played at the highest level consistently.
The other thing with when you watch Pitt tape, if you've gone to a Narduzzi clinic or any of his defensive guys, they don't like come out and say this, but they basically imply, at least this is the way I took it when I saw him 2 years ago in Orlando, that occasionally they're going to face a quarterback if you just figure out what they do and they'll just tip their cap. But they play college football. Mm-hmm. So they're running a defense that is high risk, high reward. They never blitz 5. They always blitz 6. Like if you can't figure out what they do, then you're not going to beat them. And most college quarterbacks can't figure it out. Whereas I remember we talked last year on this show about how Drake May is like, yeah, I got this. And he torched Pitt, twice. So I'm curious, like maybe we'll go back and watch like McCord against blitz specifically and see. I think one of those picks was a pretty bad tip, by the way, if I recall in that game. It seemed to kind of snowball on him, but that'll be interesting to watch. I do have to ask you about a guy who started the season fairly hot and came into the season with a ton of hype, killed Michigan, and then really kind of went in the tank from there. Like they made the playoff. He won a playoff game, but won 2 playoff games. But with Quinn Ewers, how difficult of an evaluation is that for you? Because like the Michigan tape to me looks different than everything else.
Yeah, it's so weird. He really is, because obviously, the high school hype and who he was as a prospect. But then so many different other things in that. If you remember early on in his career, his deep ball was like one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, in that he used to throw these just rainbows. He just didn't have the feel for how to throw a deep ball. And the last 2 years, look at his receiving course. He had a guy who ran a 4.21 and a guy who ran a 4.35 in 2023. This past year, he had a guy who ran a 4.29 and a guy who ran a 4.39. And he wasn't out there attacking down the football field. And it's like, why? Well, I'm not sure he has it at that level of the football field. And then from his freshman year till now, the guy hasn't physically developed a lick, man. I mean, he is very skinny going into the NFL as a quarterback. And it's like, maybe if he was Jaden Daniels, you could forgive him, but he's gotten hurt 3 straight seasons and missed time. You need to be stronger to hold up in NFL pockets. And then there's just, he'll look like a god against some of the best competition, and then he'll play an awful team and go right and look like nothing special whatsoever. So definitely one of the hardest evals. I think because of all of that, it's very difficult to buy into him ever being a consistent top end guy. And especially with the injury history, it's just like no one's going to really want to take that chance very highly. But very surprised he came out. But I do think he's kind of behind the pecking order right now, just because when a guy doesn't develop, right, when a guy isn't making year-on-year improvements, and I thought he had in that Michigan game, I'm like, oh, man, he's turned the corner, but then gets hurt the next week and reverts back to the inconsistencies we saw. I don't think anyone's really going to take that chance. I'd be surprised if he goes top 100 at this point, in my opinion.
He strikes me as somebody who you're hoping has like a Gardner Minshew-esque NFL career, whereas it's like, there will be teams that value him as a backup, but anybody who's forced into having to use him as a starter is not in a very good spot.
Yeah. Now it's more just like, is the guy going to lock in consistently? I think is the biggest thing with him. And this could be a wake-up call, right? It could be the wake-up call he needs, because at every point along the way, he's been kind of gifted and told he's, Great. God's gift to earth, right? He's number 1 overall recruit. Gets a bag to go to Ohio State, gets a bag to go to Texas, and then just given the job from day one. And it's like, I think at some point he just needs that fire lit under him consistently. And we'll see if this is it.
Is Will Howard above the like Riley Leonard, Curtis Rourke, like that level?
I think so, just because the arm talent is better considerably. It's those guys, Riley Leonard, Curtis Rourke, they're kind of like bottom of the barrel NFL arm strength. It's like you better be doing everything else right to get by at the NFL level with that. Whereas Howard, very much looks the part. 6'5", great, well put together, can put us to every level of the defense. Now he's like very robotic, and while he's like kind of athletic, I don't think he utilizes his athleticism in any meaningful manner on a football field. So there's like big knocks to his game, and he's not particularly accurate, but that's just like the archetype. And more often than not, NFL team is going to lean towards the archetype.
I feel like Will Howard's like a short burst athlete. Like he's effective in the red zone with his mobility, but you're never going to see him break a long run just because he just does not have that in him.
Yes.
He got hawked down in the championship game, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Or was that the Texas game? I'm sure the chat, like the Cover 3 tailgate here, will fill us in. I remember him getting hawked down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So